Hi, and welcome to Chapter 6. So, one of the things that entrepreneurs really need to focus on is developing management skills and leadership. It's one thing to have a successful product, it's something else to be able to get people to work hard and get things done. So, our learning objectives in Chapter 6 describe the changes occurring today in the management function. And there are constant changes in management and what management does. Describe the 4 functions of management. Number 3, relate the planning process and decision making to the accomplishment of company goals. Number 4, describe the organizing function of management. So we're going through all those 4 functions of management that they talked about in 2. Number 5, explain the differences between leaders, managers, and describe the various leadership styles. And number 6, summarize the 5 steps of the control function of management. So you can see here in this chapter, there are some basic concepts that need to be grasped in order to understand what's going on. So most managers tend to be collaborative, meaning they work well with others. Emphasis on teamwork and cooperation rather than discipline and order giving. We've all worked for, or some of us at least, have probably worked for micromanagers, people who want to tell you how to do every little thing. That is not a team player. Managers need to be skilled communicators. In other words, you got to be able to tell people what you need them to do. A team player, in other words, when you tell them what to do, that they feel comfortable coming to you if they need help. A planner, an organizer, being able to know what's going to happen in the future. What's the road? What journey are we taking here? A motivator. How do you get people to work? People get bored if they're not motivated. And a leader. So people need to look up to you as the person with all the answers. Some modern managers perform all of these tasks with the full cooperation and participation of workers. Planning, setting organizational goals. That's the big picture stuff. I read a book by a gentleman named Stephen Covey. He wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in that book, he talks a lot about management. And in one story, he describes management as being like a safari in the jungle. So you've got the guys down on the ground, and they have machetes, and they're cutting through all the undergrowth so the army can move forward. And you've got the managers. The managers are making sure that the employees have sharp machetes, because if the machetes aren't sharp, they're not going to be able to move very far. Where's the CEO? The CEO is in the top of the trees looking way ahead to make sure that the company's moving in the right direction. Developing strategies to reach those goals, determining resources needed, and setting precise standards. This is something that a business person has to do in their business plan. Is this planning, this whole idea of setting goals. For organizing, allocating resources, assigning tasks, and establishing procedures for accomplishing goals. Preparing a structure, making an organization. Who reports to who? How does the organization function on an operational level? Recruiting, selecting, training, and developing employees. And even before that, determining how are we going to decide what employees we need. Placing employees where they'll be most effective. So understanding your people so that you can put them in the right place doing the right jobs that go according to their skill, their expertise, their strength. Leading, guiding and motivating employees to work effectively to accomplish organizational goals and objectives. That's the giving incentives to people, moving them forward, giving assignments, explaining routines, clarifying policies where people have questions, and then providing feedback, doing annual or semi-annual reviews, allowing employees to know where they stand as far as the boss is concerned, the manager. Controlling, measuring results against corporate objectives, monitoring performance relative to standards. So this all goes to looking at the financials, getting financial information and non-financial information to evaluate how well the company is performing. Planning, the first managerial function is setting the organization's vision. That's what I was talking about before with Covey's story. A vision gives the organization a sense of purpose and a set of values that unite workers in a common destiny. And we've talked in previous chapters about how important it is that the values of the company be set at the top. Every company has a mission statement. It's the company's self-concept. Why do we exist? The philosophy, long-term survival needs. What do we need to keep going? What do we need to advance the company's objective? Customer needs. Customer needs, and who are the customers? Are we serving the customers? Are we exceeding their expectations? And the nature of the products or the services that we're going to provide. Goals and objectives. Setting goals is often a team process. Objectives detail how to achieve goals. And we do that by doing a SWOT analysis. SWOT, S-W-O-T, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you look at those four, you'll notice that strengths and weaknesses are looking internally. Opportunities and threats are looking externally to the company. Here's the matrix for SWOT. Potential internal strengths, core competencies. What do we do really well? Acknowledged market lead, well-conceived functional area strategies. Here are some opportunities. Ability to serve additional customer groups. Expand product lines, and this goes to that long-term look at the strategic plan of where are we going? How do we keep the company moving forward? Falling trade barriers in attractive foreign markets. Are any of our rivals sitting back on their laurels and not coming forward with new improvements? On the weaknesses side, is there no strategic direction? Is profitability not where it should be? Which means we haven't evaluated our expenses to cut expenses and be efficient, and we haven't looked for all the opportunities to increase growth of revenues. Under threats, entry of lower cost foreign competitors, that's been a big problem in the past. Rising sales of substitute products. Costly regulatory requirements. If you're in an industry that has a lot of federal regulations, is that increasing? And changing buyer needs and tastes. That's a huge one. Decision making, finding the best alternative. Remember, a decision is choosing amongst several opportunities. The heart of all management functions. So, decision-making model, define the situation. So what are we looking at? What are we trying to accomplish here? Describe and collect needed information. Once we have all the information about what we want to do, now we can develop what are the alternatives? Well, we can do it this way, we can do it this way, we can do it this way. Next comes that big part of the decision-making. Which one? Which way do we go? Do what's indicated, so you're going to follow the implementation for that particular alternative. And the thing that many companies don't do, follow up. Follow up. Was our decision right or wrong? Was something a better alternative? And if that's the case, how can we better make the decisions in the future? Problem-solving teams, 2 or more workers assigned to solve a specific problem. Sometimes brainstorming works. I've been in companies that had brainstorming sessions where we all sat around and just threw things out, threw out ideas. Here are the levels of management. So you have on the top, the vice presidents, the presidents, top management. That's where the strategy comes from. That's where the long-term goals come from. Middle management, plant managers, division heads, branch managers, they are somewhat involved in strategy, but they're more involved in implementation, in tactical works. If you look at it from with wartime terminology, right? Strategic is the long term, tactical, the short steps we're going to make to achieve that strategic goal. So what do top managers need since they're doing the strategic work, this long-term vision thing? They need a lot of conceptual skills because they're thinking about what can happen in the future. Human relations skills, they need some, not really so much technical skills because they're not at that level. Now, middle managers need an equal amount of each because they are in between the top managers who are doing the strategic work and the first line managers who are mostly responsible for operations. So the middle managers need to talk to both. Six sins of staffing. Don't hire someone because you're in a rush. If you need somebody, if somebody quits and you need to fill that position, take your time. Don't get caught up in applicants' appearances. Don't try to save money by limiting screening processes. Don't forget about feedback. Big one. Don't give promotions just because it's time. If you go look up the Peter Principle, it's all about giving promotions just because people spent the time. And finally, don't cheat your employees. Leaders must communicate a vision and rally others around that vision. So again, we're looking at the situation where everything comes from the top. What the top supports, everybody else will support underneath. Establish corporate values and ethics. And we talked about that in a previous chapter. Embrace change. I've worked for a lot of small businesses where the owner said, but this is the way we've always done it and we're successful. We're not going to change. Well, standing still isn't moving forward. Standing still is falling behind. Unless you're coming up with change, with new ways of doing things and new things to do, you're falling behind. Leadership styles. Use of authority by manager, area of freedom. So you notice as we move forward, we've got autocratic. This is where the boss gives all the rules. This is where you have your micromanagers. Participative and democratic. This is where most people are comfortable. Manager presents tentative decisions subject to change. That's the key, being open to something different. Manager presents problem, gets suggestions. Again, open to change, open to changing your ideas. Of course, free rein, manager permits employee to function within limits defined by superior. So this is where people work pretty much on their own. Empowering workers. What does that mean? Think about empowering workers. Telling employees what to do to meet the organization's goals is directing. Progressive leaders empower employees to make decisions on their own, and that enables workers to allow them to be able to assume responsibility and decision-making roles. If you think about any job you've had where your supervisor, your manager, your boss said, hey, would you do this? And they didn't tell you how, they just said, would you do it? And you did it and you were successful. The feeling when the boss came to you and said, wow, you did a great job, that's hard to duplicate. Hard to duplicate. I've got an article, actually a saying, quote on the door of my office. It was from Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was one of the founders of Apple, and in that quote, he says, "We don't hire people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people to tell us what to do." And that's an important difference. Erase pressure on workers. Work smarter. Hire dependable staff, people who can work on their own. Manage output instead of hours, and acknowledge accomplishments. Acknowledging accomplishments is really important in human resources because people want acknowledgement. I've seen a number of surveys and white papers that described acknowledgement by my superior as being more important to people than getting a raise. Train workers to be ready for a more complex corporate structure. Use new technology to foster teamwork. Fast food restaurant employees often don't have the skill and experience to make empowerment work very well. Instead, their managers generally have to supervise and direct them fairly closely. That's not totally true because I worked in fast food management for 12 years. And once I trained people, I expected that they could just move forward and do the work on their own with limited help from me. Knowledge management is giving employees the information they need to do their jobs. I've talked to numerous people who've told me that when they were hired for jobs, they were just said, here, go do it. And they had to get the knowledge on their own. It takes a lot longer for somebody to become really productive that way. The rise of big data requires determining what is most important. And the key to success is learning how to process information effectively and turn it into knowledge. Notice that dichotomy. There's a big difference between data and knowledge. Knowledge is data that's been manipulated in order to provide guidance. 5 steps of controlling. Establishing clear performance standards, so people should know exactly what it is that they're supposed to do and how that work is going to be judged. Monitoring and recording actual performance or results. Comparing results against plans and standards. There should always be standards so that you can compare. Well, I tell accounting students all the time, a ratio is great, but having something to compare to that ratio really makes the ratio important, tells you where you are. Taking corrective action when needed and providing positive feedback for work well done. The second part of that is even more important than the first, because if you provide positive feedback for work well done, people know what to do and you won't have to take corrective action. Won't be necessary. A key criterion for measurement, customer satisfaction. Do you ever notice that when you're online, you go to websites, they're always asking you, would you like to take a survey after this is over? That's what they're doing here. They're measuring customer satisfaction. And finally, performance standards. One way colleges and universities measure their performance is to track the number of students who complete their degrees or who graduate within a certain number of years. Here at AVC, we use SLOs to determine whether or not the students actually learned what they were supposed to learn for the semester. And that's it for Chapter 6. Have a great week.